Assalamu alaikum. This is Hena Zuberi, and you're watching Muslim Network News. Our top story tonight is on President Biden's visit to Tulsa, Oklahoma. Monday marked the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa Massacre. Speaking at an event in Tulsa, Oklahoma, President Joe Biden declared white supremacists the most lethal threat to the United States. He called the massacre an act of hate and domestic terrorism, holding a strong resemblance to what we see today. On May 31st and June 1st, 1921, white mobs attacked the city's affluent Black Greenwood district. They killed at least 300 African Americans and destroyed 35 blocks of Black-owned real estate. The Tulsa Massacre also left about 10,000 people unhoused. Insurance companies refused to cover damages, and no one was charged for the acts of murder and vandalism. President Biden met with 3 surviving members of the massacre prior to giving his speech in Tulsa yesterday. He also noted that in the 100 years since the tragedy, he is the first president to visit the city. Later tonight, we will conduct an in-depth analysis on the Tulsa Massacre Centennial. So keep watching Muslim Network TV. 4 more members of the anti-government militia, the Oath Keepers, have been charged for their roles in the January 6th seizure of the U.S. Capitol. The defendants added to the indictment include Joseph Hackett, Jason Dolan, William Isaacs, and an unnamed defendant. The riot was aimed to prevent the Electoral College from certifying President Joe Biden's win in last November's U.S. presidential elections. According to one of the defendants, armed Oath Keepers were awaiting former President Donald Trump's call to storm the Capitol building. This latest addition brings the total number of Oath Keepers charged to 16. Some have pleaded guilty and are working with federal authorities. The January 6th riot followed 2 other Stop the Steal rallies held on November 14th and December 12th, also in Washington, D.C. On both of these dates, Oath Keepers, Proud Boys, and other groups assaulted civilians and burnt a Black Lives Matter banner outside of an African American church. A new political group funded by the supporters of former U.S. President Donald Trump is targeting Republicans who voted to impeach him. The America Strong PAC has launched a website featuring the 10 representatives. It called on supporters to remove the 10 pretenders. Last month, the group targeted Congresswoman Liz Cheney, who had criticized Trump's actions regarding January 6th. She was removed from her leadership role in the Republican Party and now faces several Republican primary challengers for her seat. Representative Adam Kinzinger of Illinois is another one of the 10 targeted Republicans. He had started his own advocacy group called Keep Country First Policy Action. The aim of Kinzinger's organization is to defend Trump's critics. Mobile vaccination units are the latest strategy being used to ensure rural Americans get their COVID vaccine. The United States Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, has dispatched the pop-up clinics to counter declined interest in getting inoculated. Fewer vaccinated individuals means that the U.S. will not reach the herd immunity needed to help end the pandemic. The units are equipped with ultra-cold refrigerators to preserve the vaccine. Their initial goal was to vaccinate 250 people a day at each stop. However, their actual numbers have varied due to waning interest in the vaccine. Carissa Loper is with Nevada's Bureau of Child, Family, and Community Wellness. According to Loper, scheduling the shot remains the main difficulty for Americans and provides for a greater challenge than vaccine suspicion. Promotions and incentives are being used to encourage people to get vaccinated. Hollywood just can't stop groveling to China. A rare report by Penn has exposed Hollywood's acceptance of self-censorship in response to Chinese government demands. Penn is an international association of writers that promotes freedom of expression and ideas worldwide. Its investigation found that Hollywood producers regularly edit scenes from movies that might offend China. They also add scenes to do the same. Hollywood's action towards self censorship has several economic repercussions. China has become the largest film industry in the world, reaping over $3 billion annually. In addition to censorship of the content, the Chinese government routinely blacklists popular actors because of their views on China. This year's Oscar winner Chloe Zhao, Lady Gaga, Justin Bieber, and the South Korean pop group BTS have all been targets. All had upset the Chinese government for meeting with dissidents, criticizing China, or not acknowledging the countries enough in their statements. Celebrities have taken note, yet none have spoken against the genocide of Uyghurs in China as compared to Darfur almost 2 decades ago. Penn's report notes that Chinese President Xi Jinping has expressly stated his desire to ensure that Hollywood filmmakers tell China's story well. In the past, Hollywood has also avoided making films that make the Nazis look bad. This was because the industry didn't want to lose access to the German film market. Israeli media outlets are attacking the New York Times over perceived pro Palestinian coverage. In particular, the newspaper's front cover last week featured photos of children killed by Israel's latest attacks and Hamas's retaliation. In total, 69 children were featured. All but two were Palestinians. The Times of Israel called the coverage friendly fire. Others in the media called it blood libel, referring to a centuries old allegation that Jews killed Christian children. The New York Times coverage is a departure from a pattern of generally pro Israeli bias. A report released earlier this year by Holly Jackson at MIT analyzed 33,000 articles by the publication. Jackson found that references to Palestinians were likelier to use violent language than references to Israelis. It also noted that reports consistently referred to Palestinians in a passive and negative tone. In international news, chaos erupted at the Pan African Parliament in Johannesburg, South Africa on Monday. It disrupted elections for new office bearers. The dispute was between members of parliament from the South and North African regions to have elections on a rotational basis. A heated debate ensued, creating a divide between Francophone and Anglophone countries. The PAP was established in 2004 as a legislative organ of the African Union. It aims to ensure the full participation of all Africans and their grassroots organizations in governance and economic integration. Two senior officials from the United Nations Refugee Agency, UNHCR, visited a remote Bangladeshi island on Monday. They assessed the living conditions of more than 18,000 Rohingya refugees on Bhasan Char Island. They will also visit the mainland camps in the southern district of Cox's Bazar. A UNHCR official said that the UN clearly recognizes the prevailing humanitarian needs of the Rohingya refugees. She added that the UN has proposed further discussions with Bangladesh regarding its future operational engagement on the islands. Meanwhile, refugees indicated that their housing needs are not being adequately met and that the camp is akin to an island prison. They've also said that they have been eating the same food for a long time and have been restricted from fishing in the sea. Human Rights Watch has accused Bangladeshi security forces of torturing Rohingya refugees on the island. The watchdog group urged Bangladesh's government to investigate the matter. According to police sources, 29 Rohingya were detained from attempting to flee the island. A petition in the Allahabad High Court in India alleges that local government officials filed false and unfounded police reports against Muslim leaders. The 8 Muslim leaders on whose behalf the petition was filed were opposing the demolition of the 60-year-old Masjid Gharib Nawaz Al Maroof by local officials. This happened in the Barabanki district of the state of Uttar Pradesh in North India. The district is ruled by the Hindu nationalist Bharatiya Janata Party or the BJP. It is common in the state for Muslims and Dalit victims to be arrested for reporting crimes. Many Muslim leaders have gone into hiding. Local administration officials call the mosque an illegal structure. Comparisons have been made with the demolition of the Babri Masjid, which was torn down by a right-wing Hindu mob in 1992. In an order following the petition, the High Court found that the state had failed to provide evidence of falsified or forged documents. The court granted the government 3 weeks to produce the evidence. It also granted protection to the named Muslims from arrest. We all donate our used clothes with good intentions. But what happens to these clothes once we've dropped them off at a center? Ali Khalaf and Saleha Farouk have something to say about this.
The US EPA estimates that 84% of old clothing you donate to charity ends up in landfills and incinerators. Ghana is one place where 1 billion pounds of foreign label shoes, clothes, and accessories arrive every year. It all goes to a landfill here if not burned to ashes. And when it is burned in the open air, it contributes to global warming. When we give, we do good. We want someone poor to benefit from our used clothing and shoes. Unfortunately, this does not always happen. Up to 90% of old clothing donations to Goodwill, Salvation Army, and others end up with textile recyclers. Second-hand markets can no longer absorb the massive quantities of used, low-quality clothing people donate. As a result, more than half of American donations find their way to landfills in Ghana. Cantonmento is one of the largest second-hand markets in all of West Africa. For every 3 garments sold at Cantonmento, 2 get trashed. This turnover has made Cantonmento one of the most polluted places in the world. Recycling is good for the environment. However, not all used clothing can be recycled. About 15% is recycled. The rest is bundled and shipped to poor countries like Ghana and India. India is the top importer of used clothes. So next time you are thinking of donating your used clothes, think again. The marketing and fashion industries are driving consumer demand. We are buying more and throwing more. An average US citizen throws away between 70 and 81 pounds of textiles annually. Maybe you can postpone buying new and keep using what you have. Consuming less is good for the planet and the pocket.
Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned and we will be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
Welcome back. The move by Jack Dorsey, the CEO of Twitter, to donate $2.5 million out of a total of $15 million to support relief efforts in India's ongoing COVID-19 crisis to NGO Seva International has sparked a major controversy. Peter Friedrich, who specializes in analysis of historical and current affairs in South Asia, started a hunger strike protest against this announcement and also filed an online petition. Peter Friedrich is joining Saleha Farouk for a detailed conversation. Over to you, Saleha.
Thank you in advance, Hena. Today we're very happy to be joined by Peter Friedrich, who is a journalist, an author, and an activist. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Peter.
It's my pleasure.
Now tell us a little bit about why you chose to protest through the form of a hunger strike and why you didn't feel as though other methods would have been effective as well.
Yeah, thank you for asking. Well, I was on hunger strike for 5 days, about 124 hours. And now others have pledged to take up the cause to keep the chain going and to conduct fasts of their own regarding this issue. I was on hunger strike in order to oppose the donation of $2.5 million that was made by Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey to Seva International USA, which is a nonprofit organization which is linked to the RSS, a paramilitary in India, which is a violent Hindu nationalist paramilitary. The Seva International USA is run by the vice president of HSS USA, which is the American wing of the RSS. It also has a number of other directors on the organization who are affiliated in one capacity or another with the HSS, as well as some who are or have been pracharaks, that is full-time workers in the RSS in India. And past reports have emerged over the past 15 to 20 years, documenting and exposing how Seva International groups and affiliated organizations that have been raising funds internationally for relief to send back to India have used these monies to expand the RSS's power in India, as well as to fund organizations which are directly implicated in anti-minority pogroms. Now, this donation was extremely troubling and deeply disturbing, also because when, aside from the nature of Save International, when Save International gets showcased in this manner as basically a role model relief organization, the whole Sangh Parivar, that is the family of organizations which spring from the RSS, reaps huge public relations dividends, especially as the organization is granted global legitimacy in the form of, for example, a multi-million-dollar donation from Twitter. Now, why did I choose the approach of taking a hunger strike? I've been writing about human rights issues in South Asia and especially India for years, but I began particularly focusing on the RSS and Hindutva, that is essentially Hindu nationalism, around 2018. As they say, the pen is mightier than the sword. And my preferred method, first and foremost, is targeted journalism, researching, documenting, and publishing to expose the RSS and its agenda. I was, and still am, the only journalist to have covered this donation that was made by Twitter, which occurred on 10 May, a few weeks back. And it got some initial attention. But in these days of short attention spans, where we like to think that anything that happened a week ago is old news, the issue pretty quickly blew over and gained very little traction. And I felt that there was a need to do something much more attention-grabbing and drastic beyond simply writing, in order to draw sustained attention to the issue and highlight how and why Twitter's financial support of Seva International USA is so deeply disturbing.
Can you please explain to us, for our viewers, what is Hindutva, and at the same time, how and why did you become interested in challenging this policy and ideology?
Hindutva is equivalent to Hindu nationalism. It's a form of religious nationalism. Essentially, it's an ideology which teaches that India is a country for Hindus and is a country of Hindus, for Hindus, and only for Hindus. It seeks to create a Hindu state and to establish India as a Hindu nation. It seeks to subjugate and or eliminate all non-Hindus from the country. And over the past 70 to 90 years, specifically as it's been pushed by the RSS, which is the main organization driving this ideology. We have seen a large number of incidents of anti-minority violence, pogroms, particularly against Muslims and Christians. Most notably in the 21st century in 2002 in Gujarat, under the watch of Narendra Modi, who was then chief minister of the state. Now, what got me interested? Well, it's a little bit of a story. I'll try to make it brief, but it began back around 2015 when Modi was visiting San Jose, California for one of his so-called rock star receptions. Now, I'm a native of California, and as a writer focused on human rights in South Asia, I went and I joined thousands of others to protest when Modi attended this reception. At the event, I was assaulted twice by Modi supporters outside of the venue. The first time, somebody ran up and snatched a sign out of my hands in full view of the police. The second time was in the evening, where a big screen had been set up in a park outside of the venue for the overflow crowd to show up and watch what was happening inside. And I managed to get up close to the screen just as Modi was coming on stage inside. As I did so, a very, very large man, probably twice my size or more, began muscling up on me. He started shoving me, pushing me, telling me he would break me. And then within a couple of minutes, people ran up. I was holding two signs. They snatched both of them out of my hands. Police came up and kind of escorted me out of the area. And it was very shocking to me. It was very shocking to me that this could happen to me in my own home state of California. It was shocking to me that here I was not only exercising my First Amendment rights to protest, but also protesting against a foreign politician. And so I began a deep dive research into Hindutva and the RSS. I began to realize the RSS's connections to the European fascist movements of the early 20th century, and how much the writings of the early founders of the RSS mirrored the ideologies of Mussolini and Hitler, and how much violence the RSS has perpetrated over the past many decades, and how shocking and dangerous its goals are, not just for India, but also for the world, and how Modi's election as Prime Minister of India meant that the RSS is now de facto in control of India today.
Now, we hear a lot about this idea of Hindutva going into the American political system as well as the Canadian political system, including educational institutes across North America. What are some practical things that Americans, or even North Americans in general, can do to challenge Hindutva ideology in their institutions, whether it's in India or in North America?
Well, in North America, I would just address my answer to North America. In particular, in Canada, in the US, I would say above all else, the first thing that any Indian diaspora member who's concerned about the RSS and what they're doing in India should do is approach their member of parliament or their congressional representative. Why? Because these people need to be educated about the RSS. And I would guarantee that 9 times out of 10, if you go to your MP or if you go to your congressional representative, you'll find out that they do not even know what the RSS is. And if they do know, they probably have only a very vague knowledge about it. And in approaching them, I would emphasize that, as I said a moment ago, Modi being in power in India means that the RSS controls India. And the RSS is the largest, oldest, and fastest growing, most powerful fascist movement in the world today. That's an issue of concern for Indians. That's an issue of concern for the world as a whole. So besides anything else that I could think of, I would say that that's probably the most essential thing to do, because once again, as I've said, there's a severe lack of knowledge in North America, in the West in general, And I think that this goes all the way up to the halls of power, all the way up to the MPs and the representatives, congressional representatives, about even the existence of the RSS.
Now, a lot of people might see this situation as somebody that is protesting a nonprofit organization that might be responding to COVID-19 health needs in India. What response would you have to that criticism?
Well, there's a lot of nonprofits that are responding to the COVID-19 situation in India. The situation is tragic, the situation is extreme, but one thing that I would really draw out, and I've been emphasizing over the past week, over the past 5 days as I've been on hunger strike, is that when Twitter donated to Save International USA, essentially what they ended up doing was they put the money into the hands of people that are connected to the Modi regime, and the Modi regime is directly responsible for the current COVID crisis in India. I won't go into the details of that. That's been covered extensively by a lot of other people as far as how the Modi regime is responsible for what's going on and why their actions, what they chose to do and not do, led to the situation being so severe. But in the case of Save International USA, as I've mentioned, it's led, the chairperson is the HSS USA vice president. He is deeply connected to the RSS going back 20 years. He's been pictured in RSS uniform, and most notably in context of this, back in 2014, he was mobilizing. He was heavily mobilizing to get Indian Americans involved, both working in the U.S. as well as traveling and going back to India to actively campaign for Modi's election. He is essentially a political activist for Modi himself. So and this is the man basically that controls Save International USA. Other members of the board of directors have also been involved to one extent or another in similar activism in working for the election of Modi and or the BJP. So when Twitter goes and they put this money in the hands of Save International USA for the purposes of COVID relief in India, they are giving it to an organization that is connected to the regime that is responsible for causing the COVID crisis. There's a lot of nonprofits, as I said, that are working for COVID relief in India. There's many to choose from, and many others could have been chosen. And the due diligence to examine the credentials of Save International USA was not done before the money was given.
Now, I know that you touched a little bit on Hindutva in political institutions and in education institutions, but through your research and writing, I wanted to ask you about how you think Hindutva is seeping into diaspora Indian communities, as in with U.S. groups such as the Hindu American Foundation.
Well, both the Hindu American Foundation, HAF, and HSS appear to want to position themselves as the sole and only legitimate voices of Hindus in America, which is certainly not true. HAF is a group whose leadership includes several people who either have a past involvement in HSS or in other connected related Hindutva groups, such as the VHP America, which is the American chapter of the VHP in India, which is the religious wing of the RSS. The leadership of HAF also includes a number of people who are children of prominent leaders in HSS, like HSS Vice President Ramesh Buttada, the chairperson of Save International USA, as well as others who have been involved in mobilizing Indian Americans to travel to India to get Modi elected, as we just discussed. HAF, according to some insiders in Congress, has in the past appeared to be largely focused on undermining anybody on Capitol Hill who attempts to criticize Modi and the BJP. And HAF's track record in DC certainly suggests that one of their primary goals is to derail any attempts to hold the Modi regime accountable for its crimes. and also to offer apologetics and justifications for the various pieces of legislation, discriminatory legislation, such as the Citizenship Amendment Act passed last year, or passed in 2019, which was vociferously protested in 2019-2020, which essentially premises religion, which essentially premises citizenship in India on religion. And for years, HSS has been engaged in strategic public relations activities, such as, for instance, photo ops with city councilors, mayors, county supervisors, fire departments, police departments, and even members of Congress, which serves the purpose of helping them to get a foot in the door of the halls of power. And by working with these people and being pictured with them and then taking the pictures and publicizing them, legitimizing themselves and the organization. And the same goes for SEVA International USA, which is linked in with all of these organizations, with HAF and HSS. And in the case of SEVA International USA, as far as the way in which Hindutva is seeping into the diaspora Indian community, I've heard from a large number of Indian Americans, an increasing number over the past 5 days, as I've been on hunger strike, and this has drawn a large amount of attention to the issue, that they had no idea that Save International USA is connected to the RSS. They were shocked to learn it. I've heard from several people saying, "Oh, I donated to that group. I'm never going to do it again, but I did, and now I know." But they didn't realize that it's connected to the RSS. It just kind of slipped in under the radar. And now, going back to the original issue, as far as the way that Hindutva is seeping into the U.S., in the case of Twitter, with Twitter's donation, nothing has legitimized any Hindutva or RSS-linked group in America in history that I know of, more so than this donation by Twitter to Save International USA, which very much legitimizes and whitewashes this RSS proxy.
Thank you so much for the background and the insight today. We're here with Peter Friedrich, who is a journalist, author, as well as activist. Peter, thank you so much for your solidarity and for your time today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to Hena Zuberi in the new studio.
Thank you, Saleha. And thank you, Peter. You've been at the front line of the fight against Hindutva for a very long time. Before moving on to our next analysis, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back after these messages.
Our fellow Americans.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans.
And soon, they will be available to everyone.
The science is clear. These vaccines will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
They could save your life.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
That's the first step to ending the pandemic and moving our country forward. It's up to you.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. Earlier in our show, we shared a statement from President Joe Biden who said that the Tulsa Massacre was an act of hate and domestic terrorism connected to white supremacism today. To discuss this in detail, let's go to Dr. Amina Aldeen, who's in conversation with a racial justice historian from Oklahoma State University in Tulsa. Over to you, Dr. Amina.
Thank you, Hena Zuberi. I have the honor and privilege of speaking today with Quraish Ali Lansana, who is a civil rights activist, a civil rights historian, a poet, and he's the acting director for the Center for Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation at Oklahoma State University in Tulsa. Thank you for being with us on Muslim Network TV today.
It's my pleasure, ma'am.
So tell us a little bit, well, first about the center and some of its activities, especially during this height of the season time.
Yes, ma'am. So the Center for Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation at OSU Tulsa is the newest of several centers that are really was a concept that was started by Dr. Gail Christopher of the Kellogg's Foundation. And so the Kellogg's Foundation, in partnership with the Association of American Colleges and Universities, created this initiative to engage in building centers, working with universities across the country to create centers on their campuses, to engage in the dismantling of systemic racism, and to changing the narratives that surround Black and brown bodies in the academy, as well as in the communities in which these universities and colleges reside. So we are engaged in the work of racial healing circles, which is about having systematic form of conversation, questions regarding racial healing, regarding unpacking personal biases. Also engaged in changing the narrative, and so changing the narrative meaning from the curriculum and the curriculum higher ed, curriculum K-12 education. At our own institutions and at partnering institutions. But in addition to that, changing the narrative regarding how the university functions and works in harmony and partnership with the surrounding community, and in my specific case, with the Greenwood District, with North Tulsa. And so it's very important for us because OSU Tulsa literally has a Greenwood Avenue address. We literally sit on earth that was once Black Wall Street, or homes and some of the businesses that were part of comprising the 36 to 40 blocks that was Black Wall Street in its heyday. And so we have a very important mission because we have that Greenwood Avenue address, and because the relationship with the university as well as the city with regard to Black Tulsans has been so fraught over the decades. And so it's a tall task.
Well, I'm just listening to that list of things makes it incredible. But we know now Tulsa happened to be out of maybe 5 or 6 of these kinds of episodes where white women have, claimed that a Black man did something to them, later proven untrue, and white men have armed themselves and burned down, looted, killed on the street. And out of each time that not each time that has happened, but later there are healing circles, group meetings, but they never seem to reach the people who are doing the maiming, the burning, and the murdering. And we know even in larger places like South Africa, they haven't worked so well. How is it going to be different this time?
That's a great question and a very difficult question.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I will tell you again, not too far removed from apartheid in South Africa, Oklahoma had at the beginning of the 20th century, perhaps the most severe Jim Crow laws in the country.
Yeah.
And Oklahoma actually was founded by members of the Klan Tulsa was founded and run by members of the Klan, and this is not conjecture. This is documented history. For as far as I know, the Klan may still run the state. But I will tell you that it's not easy, because not everyone, as you know, ma'am, not everyone is interested in acknowledging this history. Not everyone is interested in repairing the damage of this history. And so it's a lot of work. Fortunately, there are some folks who are, and white folks in particular, who are open to growing, to healing. But there are so many who are not. I mean, Oklahoma is one of the states in the country that every county in the state has voted red, I think, for the last 40 years in presidential elections. I mean, this is this is the reddest of the red states. So it's a lot of work to engage with folks who are interested in unpacking their own biases and learning about what it is to be a BIPOC person in this city, in this state, and in this country. But it is the healthiest, or among the healthiest ways to get to this idea of reconciliation, if that's an idea, or racial healing, if that's an idea.
But how do we get to reconciliation when we're not encountering the people who, for example, drugged the man behind the truck recently? And that's in our recent history.
Right.
We're not talking to them, or the men on the truck that shot down the young black man because he's looking at a house. It seems as though these huge riots have turned into, well, now we'll do trophy collecting.
Sure.
We'll shoot the black men and brown men one by one.
No, you're absolutely correct. And the violence against the state-sanctioned violence against black and brown bodies is, hundreds of years old, centuries old. Here in Tulsa, right, as we observe the 100th 100th anniversary of one of the most violent and worst incidents of racial violence in the country, we still exist in a very deeply segregated Tulsa, where the mortality rate between Black North Tulsans and South White Tulsans is 11 years. Black folks live 11 years less, or fewer years, 11 fewer years in North Tulsa than they do 5 miles down the road, right? It's a food desert, right? So the effects of the massacre, the loss of generational wealth, continues to plague North Tulsa, continues to plague Tulsa. And you're absolutely right that there are some folks who don't want to have anything to do with it. And those are the folks who need, who would benefit most, perhaps, from the work of unpacking their own stuff, unpacking their own biases, understanding history.
I'm winning, and I'm perfectly comfortable with, every time I get an opportunity, killing black and brown bodies or denying them their rights or any of those things. Why would I give that up?
You're absolutely right. It's all about power. White supremacy is about power and control. And you're absolutely right, ma'am, that they're not planning to give it up. It's by and large. But what else can we do? It's either we engage in conversations, and we engage in activism, and we engage in education for young and old, or we take up arms, right? And I think, in my own humble opinion, that there may need to be a combination of all of the above. But
I mean, I have grandkids living right there in Oklahoma City, and my daughter tells me that, I mean, Chicago is running a close second with regard to segregation. But when you start making demands of a colonizer or an oppressor, you're really going to get their ire up. Okay. And the next wave is going to make last summer look like a walk in the park.
You know what, ma'am? I fear that as well. But what we do know, and again, speaking to your point, right, that in the last couple of months, the state legislature here in Oklahoma have passed some of the most draconian, awful bills that that particularly affect voting rights for Black and brown and poor people, affect the fact that that protesters now can be run over without consequence, that that the attack on a woman's ability to control her own body, those those actions have been debilitated even further by this state legislature in the last few months. And then what we can teach and not teach as well. And so you're absolutely right. It's all about control. It's all about white supremacy. What the alternatives are certainly not silence. So we have to engage in some work to make it better for everyone. We can.
The things that are happening, and you and I, anticipation of worse, brought about changes in how you think about curriculum for the center, because the healing circle is nice. It's a kumbaya moment, and all of the people there want to do something. It's cheaper than therapy. But what about the people who want to kill us?
Yeah, well, and you're right about that, ma'am. I mean, the racial healing circles can be a bit kumbaya, but they're really actually can be rather powerful and transformative. But it's more than that. It's more in addition to that. It's engaging and changing the way history is taught. It is and resisting the kinds of bills that have been passed here and in other states that curtail the ability to teach real history. The ability to teach the truth. So it's more than that.
You have a governor who is saying, no, you will not teach any of that.
That is correct.
So then what do you do?
We keep teaching it. We find ways to do so. And even my saying this is even dangerous for my own job. But I believe that we keep teaching it.
We have your back at Muslim Network TV. So let us know as soon as you know that they're getting ready to cut you off, let us know. But I'm just saying, everybody is recognizing that something different has to happen.
Yes, ma'am.
And as you move shaping curriculums, and then put yourself in danger of losing your job, but not only your job, your life.
Yes, and in a place like Oklahoma, those two things can be one and the same.
Exactly.
And so, but it's the work. I spent 30 years on the south side of Chicago. I've been back in Oklahoma.
God. And you survived.
Yes, ma'am. And I've been back in Oklahoma for 3 years. I was born and raised about an hour and 40 minutes to the west of Tulsa, but I hadn't lived in this state in 30, over half my life. And so I understand that the kind of work in which I was engaged in Chicago isn't quite as widely received, widely accepted in a place like Oklahoma, but that's who I am, and it's the work that has to be done. And so it's more than just the curriculum, although the curriculum is important. It's about the work we do in the streets. It's about the collaborations we work with community partners. It's about even helping Black folks understand that we've lived, that Black folks here have lived with such weight on their back. My sort of analogy for that is that a person of color is laying on the street, and a white man wearing combat boots has one foot on the person's head, and the white man says that you can get up if you can move my foot from your head. Some Black folks, some folks try and succeed, some folks try and fail, and some folks never try. And it is that kind of weight, the weight of white supremacy in a place like Oklahoma, that even requires that we work with other BIPOC communities about your agency, your rights, your power, and using your voice and your actions and your dollars to support change as opposed to supporting the status quo. That's a part of the work as well.
Well, I can't thank you enough, Mr. Lasana. And we will follow you and keep you out of trouble, or at least bail you out of trouble.
I appreciate it.
I thank you so much for being with us today. And back to you, Hena.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amina. That's all from our Washington studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in to our segment. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.